another one. Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see at least some people turn up tonight on a rainy night. And I firstly have to offer an apology from my partner in crime of the Moths project, which is Professor Graham Chandler. He actually turned up in the car park to tell me at 7 o'clock and said, I think I'm coming down from a cold from that damn fire and biodiversity conference at Margaret River. And then I was going to bring another person, a new visitor as well, from Eco Action, and she had to decline for not just a cold, but not from the same conference. So hopefully I'm not a spreader, all right? But I'm very keen on mothing, and Graham and I have been working over the last decade, usually a half day a week, usually a Thursday and Friday, and over time we're getting towards the end of the massive family Geometrid, and with the aim to produce a checklist, the most up-to-date checklist of Western Australian Geometrid. So, hands up if you're a mother. There's a hand there, there's a hand there, there's a hand there, there's a hand there. Well, there's a few, and one, oh, Mark even. I put up 2 hands, great. Okay, hands up if you're a mother. I got 1, I got 2, I got 3. Okay, right. All right, so let's continue on. Light trapping is a great thing to do. I love it, I'm addicted to it. All right, so the general scope, of course, is defined by an imaginary border, of which many geometric moths do not respect. They just cross over, easy peasy. And what we're finding, in fact, because of the general Eastern bias of collections, for instance, the best Western Australian collection of Geometrid moths in the country is not in Perth, sadly. It is in Canberra, which makes it very hard for a keen mother to just sort of hop on the next plane to Canberra to look in a box to try and resolve a taxonomic issue. So, but every so often, every 2 years, the Australian National Insect Collection has an open weekend for selected mothers that converge from all over the country and get the run of the Lepidoptera gallery. It's fantastic. All right. Okay, well, it is a very big family, and that's why it's taken Graham and I so long to get to the place we are. We can sort of see a bit of a light at the first end of the tunnel for the first phase of scanning literature, scanning websites, all that sort of thing. And some of you probably know some of these websites, for instance. Okay. And of course, there are known unknowns. There are plenty of unknowns as well out there, and I and others have undoubtedly photographed unknown unknowns. But there's a lot of known unknowns, and they often appear in the websites with an Australian National Insect number, which is helpful. So at least they're a known entity and they're advertised, so they can be used, perhaps in a conservation argument, to protect a rare habitat or something like that. It's better than them just invisible in a box in a museum somewhere without a code and not in the public arena. So that's a good thing to do. All right, now most of us may have a stereotypical image of your average Geometrid moth sitting out there on the bark with its wings outspread, which I call the broad wing Geometrid moths. And some years ago, I travelled to the Kimberley in a vehicle. I actually trucked my 4-wheel drive up from Perth to Broome and fully packed, and the intention was to go up to Gig River Road and penetrate into Mount Elizabeth Station and try and find a monsoon vine thicket to catch various things. So I had some reptile targets, and I had, of course, the normal insect and spider targets. But guess what? I lost reverse in the main street of Derby. So I drove from Brew to Derby. So what are we going to do for the rest of our holiday? So we ended up in the pub, my wife and I, and Spinifex, and then we sat in a bar. Above the bar, up there, behind the counter, was a very badly drawn chalk drawing of a little island with a single palm tree on it, and a badly drawn helicopter, a little red one, flying over it. And we thought, well, what are we going to do with the rest of our 2 weeks holiday? So then, after a few beers, we sort of convinced each other we'd catch that helicopter and fly 1 hour out of Broome into Walcott Inlet. We had to, when we attempted to take off, we had to transfer the contents of the 4-wheel drive into the helicopter. The helicopter would not take off. So take some more out, back into the truck. And then put it on, and then it got a little bit up off the ground with me and the pilot in, and then it fell back down again. Didn't fall back down, thankfully. So the pilot said, no worries, look, I will fly with David down to the mud flats. You, my wife, Flo, you can go and hop into the manager's car and he'll drive you down to the mud flats, and then we'll meet and we'll hop in, and I think we'll get up. It was a nice slow rise like that. And we just did it. So we had to land at a place where there was water, of course. And we spent 10 days in the most remote part of Australia I've ever been, I reckon. But anyway, I got that, and that appears to be an undescribed species in the monsoon thing that we're counting. Right, here is another hills one. This would be probably in Charles's backyard, Drew's backyard at certain times of the year, if they ran a light truck. And now we're getting down to this. I mean, this one is half thinking it's going to get up and fly, so it hasn't got its wings fully spread at rest, so it's not at rest. And it's clearly a male, because you can see his declinations on the outside. It's usually most geometrids have a distinctly different antenna between the sexes, but some don't. Right, and I always seem to get this species around Melaleucas on the edges of swamps. And this one, well, I've now changed my, I don't think it's near Euphragma anymore. I think it's, I occasionally stumble on websites across things that are better matches than I first thought, which is always a good thing. I can elucidate. So this was from up north of Morrowa in the Moonagin Hills. It's possibly undescribed. I can't find a good match for it. Now, there's plenty of these things. These probably, there's not a genus available for this species. It's been currently put in its original state was clear, or the genus, but now that's deemed to be a subgenus. And we're waiting for a taxonomist to come along and actually give it a genus. That would be rather good. But this sort of thing you commonly find it on your wall, the porch light, front porch light, the back light, quite common, but a mess. Right, we're down at Timberwood Cabins down near Walpole, and this is Castor of the Cedar, but it's a very variable thing. Those watches on another specimen on the other side of the light track won't have those dark markings. So this is just a particularly well marked one. So there's a lot of variability in some species, which is a trap for the unwary. And I've been caught in that trap. Now these species are often, as you're walking through the heath or forested leaf litter, they'll fly up ahead of you and settle They like landing on sand. Sean, I know Sean gets them at where she is. Alright, and this one is probably the most well-known of the broad-wing local. It often sits on grey fences and yeah, so quite a nice red patch on the underwing as well. So sometimes the underwings of geometrids can be quite diagnostic. You get two very similar looking species, but you turn them over. Oh yeah, now I know how to tell the difference, superficially at least. Well, there's the underwing. Cryptophono occultaria. Right, and some come in jade and lipstick. There's a whole group of, well, it's not a huge group, but a number of genera of broadwing geometric moths that are green, and often with a trim, and may often be tinted with pink. And that's quite a widespread Australian species, not southern Australian species at least. Broadwing. And then we get to the really big genus with lots of known unknowns. I think they're up to 76, Anic 1 to 76, plus all the species. So Dichromodes is very, very big. It's a big. Yeah.
Was that previous one of the ones also known as the Wattle Bazaars?
I'm hoping some proper names. Daniel?
They've got very strange looking caterpillars, they're all covered in triangular flanges.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure whether this one, I think there are other geometric moths that have those explanate margins, if you like. They're quite bizarre looking things. You don't know exactly what you mean. I should put a picture in. Oh, I might put a picture in actually or something. We'll see. I've got a few caterpillars to look at as well. Alright. And this is of course a local species. It's quite consistent, thank heavens, and reasonably easy to identify. And then you've got your sort of delta. I call them the delta because of the way they sit at rest. And that looks like a stealth bomb. But it's clearly a dead leaf camouflage specialist. As is that. And that's gone through quite a number of genera over the years, but the latest is this sturgeon. So this is quite a common species in the southwest and including around the Greater Perth Metro. And then we've got a few difficult groups like the genus Amalura. Graham and I could not place this, so we put our own designation. We've called this species C. So we're hopefully going to find out from greater powers if they know what this could be. And then we get into the tent, what I call the tent geometric moths, because they hold their wings, obviously. They're long, quite long wings, and they hold it in the tent position. And these things are very, almost like pointing. These palps are very forward pointing and very stiff. It's almost like a horn. But what males do, or no, male, it's not sex. It is not sex linked, so most sexes have those palps. And crests as well, broken stick. I think they're broken stick camouflage artists. And that's another, a very noctuid looking species with some post-cariata. I got a Mulibini actually for the first time. Then I've got it since in other places as well. Not common, according to my experience. And then we've got the genus well, I don't know whether you say that as a hard chi or it's Ciampa or Chiampa, I'm not sure. Again, they have those crests. And then we've got the large-bodied geometrids. They're usually in the subfamily Inachrominae, and they've got funny little palps which are often naked in this genus, so there's no setae tufting on it except for the base. And it's got its wings in the butterfly position. Another stealth bomber. And that's up in the hills mainly, Geometrid, Geometrid. Of course, this is probably the second most well-known Perth geometric moth, Enochroma venerea. And the caterpillars you quite often see sitting on hakias, grippies sometimes. This is one of our larger local species. It's not your typical geometric moth. In fact, Lasiocampidae is another family of moths, hence the name. And then we have these strange little guys where the males have bat foils. We think they're bat foils. So the idea is the males have to fly more often, and because they fly more often than the females, they've developed these, or evolved these special organs on their wings. They may be tufted, they may be almost like ears. That's almost like a membrane, an ear drum almost. So we think they're most likely associated avoiding bats or protecting bats. And that's female on the bottom of this one. Insigillata, Chloroclistus insigillata.
Is that one actually native from Australia?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that's true. So it wasn't originally native to English, it was just active-based.
No. I think as far as I'm aware, Daniel, they are native Australian. Yeah. And then we've got strong contrast pattern geometrids. And I saw one of these on the sill at the road where I stayed outside of Margaret River on the farm for the fire and biodiversity conference last weekend. That would be known to Charles and Drew at least, wouldn't it? You've seen that before, guys? Yeah. A very attractive species. Whereas Dichromotis personalis is more likely on the Swan coastal plain than in the hills. And then you've got the weirdos with the tatty fringes. And I've only, I've got that twice ever in the wheat belt. Quiriding and dog-belling. This is Spermatic 2. It's built like a hawk moth almost. So that's unknown. And then we've got the pinkies. And the genus Notiostera is a salt lake margin. It's in the fleshy-leaved saltbush in the end. So I'm suspecting there's a lot more potential for new species of Notiosteras in the more arid, unchecked, unlight-trapped salt lake systems that are isolated from each other, otherwise known as the paleo drainage. You've got the pink Dichromotis as well.
The saltbushes are rather pink themselves, aren't they?
Well, at a certain stage, yes, they go pink first and then to green. So it's the immature foliage, I think you find. And then those geometric moths, well, you've already seen an example of the butterfly situation. This is a different species, and you can see them in the daytime. This occasion in the daytime, but they also come to light traps. And there's a large genus also called Chrysolarentia, and when they're disturbed at the light trap or they're foraging, and they can be diurnal as well, they behave like butterflies. And then we've got thoracic crests and keels. So I recently got this is the genus Paralea. There are two species in Western Australia. One's called Paralea carri, and the other one's called Paralea jarrah. And that is jarrah. How do I know that? Because there was no carry around, but the problem is the last ones I got, there was both carry and jarrah, and they're not easy to tell apart. But they've got this heel, very sharp heel there. You've got the double crest, physiolaya, and I haven't worked out, Graham and I have not worked out what that is. And this as well is a complex group, lots of mysteries in it. And long palped geometric moths. So this is almost like a pin, a needle pop, and that's a brush belt. And now some caterpillars. So this is when we go to Graham and I go to the Moths. Paul Kay occasionally goes to the Moths convention in the Australian National Insect Collection. It's coming up in August, but unfortunately I won't be able to attend that one. We have a great guy called Steve Williams, and we need hundreds of Steve Williams to try. All these people with zillions of pictures of caterpillars, including geometric caterpillars, and they can't match it with the adult because they don't actually breed them fully out. So there's, there's some of those species there. I can say, yes, I've got that species if I knew what the adult looked like. I've probably got it as an adult, and you've seen it tonight, maybe, but I can't match the two of them. So this is the new generation is perhaps for these guys over here might be whenever they find a par or neither. Well, a caterpillar on a native plant that's close by, see if you can breed it out and photograph the stages. Now, most geometric caterpillars are not gregarious, but there is one common one that sits mainly on the turet and sometimes Eucalyptus rudus, flooded gum, and it clusters together in a rough silken cover of various leaves joined together, and you can often see the fecal pellets all around it. Once you get your eye on, you find just how common they actually are. But that's not the norm for most caterpillars, in fact. And then we've got our camouflage artists. These were quite common last weekend with light trapping down south of Mount River, up the Margaret River. Cercopetes obtusata with it does the atypical or the asymmetrical abdominal twist. So normally birds have a search image based on symmetry. So if you can twist yourself like that or something like that, it's, it makes it harder to find. But that's this tremendous sticking out a bit, but that was the intention of the picture. Really, otherwise if it was on a green leafing, it would be hard to see. Indeed, this is a Queensland species that is used for logo. That's Queensland species. But that demonstrates quite the common broad wing geomoth situation, as does that. And that's obviously, any ideas why that could be black? After fire, Mark, exactly right. So that's what we were all about last weekend at Michael River. So it's obviously, you might say that the ancient ancestor of this, our first fire system, was dry lightning for millions and millions of years. And then the first wave burners, that was the word I just used to describe, first wave burning Homo sapiens arrived. And that was 60, 65, whatever that date is, and they started burning the country in a big way, thus forcing a vegetation system that was basically pyrophilic, which means it's fire adapted. So all the delicate little things, perhaps, that were growing around the swamp margins and around the rivers and what have you, the drainage systems, there could have been considerable extinction before we even know it, including the insects that would have pollinated and fed on them. So wherever humans go, they do damage, and they're doing it to benefit themselves ultimately. So it's quite Darwinian. Right, and some more camouflage. And that was just simply by hanging your light trap above the leaf litter. There's lots of moths there, and a number of families. There's a paralaia, and that's a jarrah, showing its crest, but well camouflaged. So really, what's driving the magnificent camouflage in most insects? The dinosaur eye. What could I be talking about?
Tweety birds.
Tweety birds, yes, Terry, you got it. Tweety birds, very sharp-eyed beasties, and I tell you, if you want to be bright pink against a green background, you won't pass your genes on. Okay, traps for the unwary, and I've been caught in them. So, on the left, you've got your Geometrid, right, and then we've got ring-ins from other families, mostly nocturnes here. And I could have gone on and on. But that was just to say, usually the palps in a nocturne, for instance, they're two little pins sticking up. And they're not typical of a geometric palp. But there's always exceptions to the rule. And you sort of start learning the rules as when you look at lots and lots of moths, as I do. There's some more examples. Again, the Geometrid on the left and mostly noctuids on the right. Okay, and there's there are the places that Graham and I often hang out in on the web, and what we are basically calling for is anyone who's interested in contributing, and we'll just end up, I think we can make a fantastic resource on the WASTE website where people will, or mothing type people, or any general interest person in moths, can go and hopefully solve their own, do their own IDs. So it's the whole idea of the project to save people time. No doubt Brian Hannich over the years has answered many queries from the museum. What moth is this? What moth is that? And as have other entomologists present in this place at this time, no doubt. So the idea is make a list of what you have, you will photographically in a Word document and post it to us or to me at info@spinuswonders. And this is a filtering, because we can become absolutely overwhelmed with 100 shots of Crypsophona occultaria, and we don't need it at all. So we got to filter out that bulk, and just you end up with ones that you think might be a geometric moth. It may not be, but that's okay. If you're not sure, submit it. But if it's a good shot, it's clear, and we'd like around 7 megabytes. We'd like to operate on the idea of a thumbnail, and you look at a whole lot of thumbnails, and if you want to look closer, you click on the thumbnail and it'll come up with a bigger, more detailed image. Right, and then we can file share, or if you haven't got many pictures, you could just send them by email as an attachment.
We should put that on the Facebook page. So
Yes, well that's a good idea, Rob. Excellent idea.
Send it to me, I'll put it up. Maybe one.
All right. Well, I think I'll be giving, Mark, will I be giving you the USB? Do you want it? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, so she will have all that information at hand. Okay, and I think that is it.